How's it going, everybody? I assume everybody is an ambitious term since we just started it, but sorry, a little bit late. I know we were scheduled for 8, but excited to answer any questions you got on the top 100 and really just anything beyond that too. Feel free to expand it beyond the top 100 discussion here. But thank you so much for coming in and hanging out. Thank you so much to everybody that has kind of checked in and read the top 100 list and maybe some feedback and listened to some of the episodes that we've been putting out, breaking down the top 100. We're going to be doing that throughout the next week and a half. Jack and I on the call up going through 15 prospects at a time, flying through 100 all the way down to one, and giving you kind of the explanation, the background, everything you need to know about each prospect. But in addition to that, I wanted to be able to answer some more questions as to maybe why somebody fell or why one player was ahead of the other, maybe criteria for the list, things that went into it, because I know there's a lot of different lists out there, and I know that a lot of people that put them together do a really good job of maybe explaining what goes into it. But I always feel like I could do a better job of kind of sharing what goes into the process and how it all works on our end and how we end up coming up with the list that we've got here and the thought that goes into it. But the first question comes right in, and it's a good one. I figured it would be something along the lines of this guy, but it's Max Clark. And the question is, when do we see Max Clark, or when do we see Max Clark get to the bigs? I assume it's tough at this point to project something like that, just because we've barely seen him. I obviously, to get a little taste of low A was great last year. I know that it wasn't quite the numbers he was hoping for, but you saw flashes of what can be. And the thing with him is he's got that high floor because of the defensive prowess in center field, because the ability to go get it, and then also with an awesome arm as well. So that's always going to help him climb a little bit quicker. The field of hit's going to help him climb pretty quick. But I also think that there's no need to rush a guy like this, because his ceiling is, tools across the board. It might not be plus power, but you can have some impact. So if you rush guys like that, I think they end up leaning more into the contact side, spray the ball around, be a speedster. Whereas you want to see that growth, and you want somebody like, Max Clark to be letting it eat in advantage counts. You want him to learn how to tap into his power a bit more consistently. So, I mean, on the write-up, we got an ETA of 2027. I think he can beat that. I think he can be there by the end of 2026. But again, there's not necessarily a reason to rush him because at the end of the day, there's going to be plenty of time and plenty of development. And the Tigers are in a pretty good spot organizationally, I think, with a lot of the talent they have at the big league level. We'll keep it with the Tigers here. And my guy Clay Snowden, the GOAT, asking me about Job. Jackson Job mid-season if all goes right. I 100% think so. I think it could even be sooner than that. It depends on what the Tigers' plan is. And also, the Tigers have a unique situation where all of a sudden, that rotation's pretty good. And you got guys that, are a little bit older that you want to see probably get a bit more opportunity now and have a little bit more clarity on. Even a Matt Manning, of course, Jackson Job is going to be, you hope eons better than him, but you still want to know what you got with Matt Manning, and there's no reason to rush Job. But I'm also of the belief you don't waste bullets in the minor leagues when guys have the command and the stuff to get out to the big league level. Because pitchers, we see it all the time, even big leaguers, even veterans, they get better. They have things click for them even 4 or 5 years into their career. You can always develop, and hitters too, but with pitchers, I think it's even more so, where that development can be finished at the big league level. And as long as he's good enough to get outs, doesn't strike you as one of those guys that's going to nibble and not trust his stuff, I think at the end of the day, you could push him pretty quickly. With Job's stuff, I think he is someone that could get up within the first couple months of the season here if they wanted, if they needed. Ultimately, I think with the Tigers situation, I'd imagine that Job probably comes up somewhere in the middle of the season. And you know what? I mean, I think he'll be ready to go, and he'll be nasty right away. Like, I'm trying to scroll to the write-up right now. But, I mean, Job, when you have a plus heater and the shape is also good, you have the slider that, I mean, that's what really turned all the heads, right? That's all we heard about with Job when he was drafted, was the slider. Now he adds a cutter that's hard in the low 90s that he spots. And then he's got this changeup that's just gross and fades. And that was a pitch that performed as well as any for him last year. The injury last year was more of a precautionary thing in terms of how long they kept him out. he talked about that on the interview, which I thought was great. It was one of my favorite interviews that we've done. Just being able to hear him talk about adding that cutter, the development of the changeup, how he's been able to throw harder, why it was actually nice for him to ease his way back in because it was almost like an extended spring training to work on things. And look at the result. You got a guy that I think is the best pitching prospect in baseball. Another Clay one, real quick. Rushing a tradable piece with the Smith News, or will he move off of catcher? Another guy that we had on the show recently, so definitely check out that episode as well. We were able to talk to Dalton Rushing out in spring training. He's worked really hard on the catching, and that's been a priority for him. And I think that's been a Dodgers priority for him as well. And I think for that reason, the goal is to continue to develop him as a catcher. The bat, he even said himself, he feels really good about where it's at. Above average power, good feel to hit, great approach. But then, yeah, you look at the big league situation and you've got a guy that just got locked up for 10 years. And of course, Rushing's not going to be able to slide in and get that much opportunity there. I think there's going to be a new wave of catchers. We already are seeing so much more talent there. And I think we're going to see teams with scenarios where you got two talented catchers. And the Dodgers may be an exception to this because their DH spot's always going to be insanely good, especially with Ohtani there. But I think you could see a lot of teams operating with the primary catcher and the backup catcher, maybe still both being guys that can swing it and both being guys that could fill in at the DH spot and produce. With Rushing, I think the Dodgers are going to continue to develop him as a catcher because at the end of the day, he's their best catcher prospect. I like Lorenzo. I think he's going to also make that leap. But, Diego Cartaya, I really don't like the direction that he's kind of trended both physically and approach-wise. And yeah, I think just knowing that you still got to have catchers, you still got to have that depth. And, if you ever move him off of the position because he's hitting so well, you can. But I don't think we're going to see him moved really unless he's in a Michael Busch type of situation. And unfortunately, I could see him kind of in a Michael Busch type of situation. Question from Riley Binder. That guy actually looks really familiar too. That looks really familiar on the left in the green shirt there. But what about the Marlins prospect on your list? Thoughts on when he breaks into the, you mean the rotation, Riley? Noble Meyer's nasty. When I saw him on the backfields, he was dynamite. And then unfortunately, basically a lot of these subsequent outings, he was not as sharp. He's a teenager. He's got crazy stuff in terms of what you can dream on as well. Funky release, fastball that already flashes plus, slider from that release point plays up to, I think, eventually double plus as the command gets better. And I watched him throw a few really good changeups in the bullpen and then throw a few really good changeups in the scrimmage that I was able to watch. But he is tall, he is young, and it's got a little bit of that baby draft to him where sometimes he's not totally under control and repeating his mechanics and controlling all of his limbs. But then I've seen spurts where he does look a lot better. So I think it's just trying to find that consistency, repeating the delivery a little bit more. But this is a guy that, top prep arm in the last draft, a guy that I think really could ultimately fly up the ranks here and be one of the better pitching prospects in baseball if things come together and kind of, he continues to mature. He's got it, between the ears as well. Favorite prospect outside of the top 50? Ooh, that's a great question. And for those that want to follow along, you can go check at justbaseball.com. We've got this list, right up in front and center. I think it's the banner story, unless our wonderful managing editor replaced it, which I wouldn't blame him. It's already been a couple of days. But outside of the top 50, there's a few names. I don't want to cop out, but I'm going to go through a few that I really like, and then I'll pick one, I promise. These are still of the 100, of my 100 favorite prospects. So it's really hard to pick, which, but in terms of just who I think, and again, also I could just say the 51st, right? But a guy that I'm most excited to watch, a guy that I'm really pumped about, a guy that I would love to buy stock in is Arjun Nimmala. The Toronto Blue Jays, I think, stole him 20th overall. He's a guy that had a lot of helium going into the draft. A lot of late helium where all of a sudden he's starting to hit for more power. He's seeing a little bit more impact. And he's a wiry guy. He's tall, in terms of like the frame. He looks long. He's I think got a lot of room to add strength, but he's already producing impressive, bat speed. He's already elevating. He already has a pretty advanced swing. And the glove looks good at shortstop. So I think you got the potential, as you can see here, like above average tools across the board. And then good defense at shortstop. That's a guy that could quickly become one of the better prospects in baseball. my guy Jeff Ponce of Baseball America does an unbelievable job of getting video. He's on the scene as good as anybody is, and he just posted some open side swings of Arjun Nimmala. And I mean, it just looks like the swing just gets better and better and more polished and more polished. And we haven't even seen too many reps from him. Like, he hasn't even had that much experience, and he was one of the youngest guys in the draft cycle. So I do think that Nimmala could be a guy that jumps when you have that above average hit and power combo with speed and defense to go with it. I mean, what else do you want out of a player? Thoughts on Justin Crawford? So Crawford didn't quite make the list. He's a guy that I wouldn't be surprised if he does make the list. Phillies prospect that, I mean, is super talented. Son of Carl Crawford, of course. And I can see why people would have him in the top 100. I am prepared to, consider him there and maybe even the midseason update. The swing needs a lot of work at this point. He's relied a lot on speed. I think it was like a 70% ground ball rate, if I remember correctly, from this past year, and just, again, relied on the speed and bad defense to be able to hit for average. But he does flash decent EVs. Another guy that has plenty of room to add strength. We know he can motor just like his dad, and he's going to be a pretty good defender. So he's going to need to adjust that swing a little bit. He's going to need to, I think, make some adjustments overall. But, we got a super chat as well. Thank you so much. I want to make sure I don't miss that. But I do think Crawford could still be a pretty darn good player, and easily could be a top 100 prospect. Thank you so much for the super chat, Andrew. This is awesome. What do you think the outlook on the Twins outfield is in 2025, 2026 with Rodriguez, Jenkins, Gonzalez potentially coming up? So that is an excellent question. I think this is going to be a big year for the Twins to figure out what they've got with Larnach, what they've got with Wallner, and what they've got with some of the other guys that they have in the fold there. Of course, Kepler, being a free agent after this year is helpful to clear some of that cluster up. We'll see what the Buxton situation is. Is he going to go back to DHing more? Is he going to play more center field? The hope, of course, I pray that he can play center field because baseball's better when he's out there. But the challenge is right now, Walker Jenkins and Emmanuel Rodriguez, I think, can play a solid center field or a passable center field. But I think Emmanuel is going to continue to get thicker and slow down a little bit. And I think Walker could kind of do the same. And I probably both project best in a corner. Teams just value center field defense so much right now. I could imagine that. I mean, the pipe dream, again, is that Buxton is somehow still playing center field. And then you have those two guys in the corner. Gabriel Gonzalez is going to need to show some things. Like, I think it was a great get for them in that deal. I think he's got some talent there. Obviously, the bat to ball is good, but the power is not as good as I think the numbers may imply. The EVs were a little bit surprisingly low. The approach needs work. He's very raw in that regard, swings a ton. So I'm a little worried because there's not a ton of raw power yet, and I don't see that body really. Like, he's going to have to really change physically. And then the defense is not very good. It's fine in a corner. So he's going to need to hit. He's going to need to slug to be a corner outfielder. And then we're going to need to see that approach get better as well. I think he could be really solid. He's a good prospect, but I don't know if I'm considering him in the long-term plans as much as I'm considering an Emmanuel and a Walker Jenkins. And I think those guys can, easily slot into both corners and play. Or if I had to pick one, I'd imagine that I think Emmanuel's pretty good out there. I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to stay there and at least play a passable center field. How far off the list is Cam Collier? Great question. Reds prospect who I think is getting, and I mean, I don't want to be a hypocrite here because he did just miss for us. And we're going to put out a just missed article next week, and we'll do an episode on the prospects who just missed. But people have just been, I think, way too far off on Collier now. Like, I get it. The body is backing up a little bit. He does look like a guy that could end up slowing down, move to first base. Yes, puts a lot of pressure on the bat. He's also very young. And I think we also have to give him a little bit more credit for flying up into professional baseball. I still think holding his own in low A. I understand the defensive questions. I understand the concerns about the body and things like that. But he earns high marks for the makeup. His dad played in the big leagues. He started hitting the ball really hard, really hard in the second half, and started to produce a lot better in the second half. The chase rates were bad, and that was something that was concerning because a big thing that was I think a selling point for Collier and his polish for such a young age was, oh, he makes great swing decisions. He has a really good feel for the zone. That wasn't the case last year. He was chasing over 40% of the time. And I think that's a reason why scouts have soured. I think the defensive concerns are a reason why scouts have soured. And I get it. But at the other end of things, he's still young. He was putting up EVs over 110. And again, I'm going to bet on that makeup. Even if he has to move to first, it's a solid prospect with a lot of potential. I still think he's a just missed on the top 100. Another Reds question. Matt Golding, thank you so much for the super chat. And Matt, I always love when you join these lives. Always a ton of fun and appreciate your questions. Petty was pretty close. He's a guy that, I mean, if you remember when we were doing the Reds episode, I was really excited about what we saw from him at the end of the year. It's just when I consider the 100 prospects I'm taking, and let's say I'm building a franchise, as much as I would like to say that Petty is in that first 100 players that I would draft in this hypothetical, expansion draft, the injury concerns, I think the durability, just general durability concerns, the way that he has kind of been managed very carefully, similar to Marco Raya. I love Marco Raya with the Twins. I think he's super talented. We also haven't seen Marco Raya throw 5 innings, basically. Same thing with Chase Petty. Didn't see him throw more than 4 innings last year. I will say he was great, and we saw a lot of good things. He's also, his identity's changed, and that's fine. I actually like the way he looks now, where it's more heavy fastball, pitch to contact, ground balls, and then he'll get you with a nasty slider. He's added more of a true four-seamer with Ride. I think that's going to help a ton. But at the same time, I think between not seeing him stretched out, a little bit of the durability concerns, and then just wanting to have a better understanding of who he wants to be, what kind of pitcher he's going to be, and then get a better idea of how that can work and what kind of profile he'll be. I just need to see more from Petty. And I think at some point this year, he's definitely a guy that could enter the top 100 list. Which Dodgers prospects, great picture, by the way, Eli Manning. Which Dodgers prospects, both on and off the top 100, do you think can get called up this year? And what of the group makes a meaningful impact? That's an excellent question, because the Dodgers farm is in an interesting spot where it's talented as always, but I don't know if they're littered as much with guys that can, get up there and make an impact other than Andy Pages. And I think Andy Pages will make an impact early in the season. At the very least, he demolishes lefties, and that's a role that I think he could thrive in. Josue DePaula, far away. I love him. Obviously, he's a 33rd ranked prospect. Dalton Rushing, they're going to focus on developing that defense. I think unless something happens to Will Smith, we wouldn't see him. But I do think that there's a world where, God forbid, something happens to Will Smith. Rushing's been working. That's something that was fun to talk about with him. He's been working with Yamamoto during spring training. He's been working with Walker Buehler during spring training. He's been working with so many folks, meaningful pitchers and on that staff. He said, catching Tyler Glasnow felt like it was a live AB for him, like hitting at the plate. Felt like he was handing him the ball. So he's gotten that experience, and I think that's been important in an emergency. I could see him plugging in there. But at the end of the day, guys in the top 100, I don't think that anyone outside of Andy Pages is going to really make an impact. But in terms of pitchers, River Ryan's a guy that had a ton of helium, and I think people are really excited about that probably will get up at some point and make an impact. It's a shame that Nick Frosso's arm, went out, and that's been a concern with him, unfortunately. But Stone has looked great. He's probably going to start the year, up there. If I had to give one, clear-cut answer, it's going to be the pitchers. River Ryan, Landon Knack, those guys will get up at some point and make an impact for the Dodgers. Because at the end of the day, you're going to need innings. No matter who you are, you're going to need innings. Is Dylan Cruz okay? Yes, absolutely. And it's funny because on social media, this is where we got the most like, what do you mean Cruz isn't in the top 10? First of all, he's 11. Second of all, the guy that's ahead of him is on the big league team for the Padres, younger, and has already hit through the minor leagues in Jackson Merrill, who I'm talking about. And I still think has room for more juice. Cruz, I think, is fine. The thing with Cruz is, and it's the reason why we dropped him a little bit more maybe than others, is you can go back and look at the draft write-ups I had on Cruz. Of course, I thought easily top guy in the class, but there's always going to be something that you're concerned about, or it's all relative, but slightly concerned about. The one thing that I was just slightly concerned about was his ability to hit sliders. He can be in and out of the zone sometimes a little too quickly and kind of pull himself off. He's really adjustable with the lower half and really explosive. But some of these really explosive rotational guys can take themselves out, too quickly. And he gets a little spinny. I don't know, and everyone talks about the 2020 vision and all that stuff, or better than 2020 vision. Yeah, I think he has a great eye. But there's something about breaking balls, whether it's the pitch recognition aspect, it's usually hard sliders, or just the path that's taking him off. And I even saw that against good sliders in college. The difference is there's not that many really good sliders in college. Again, I didn't think it'd be too much of an issue, but it was the one thing that came up. Then he gets to pro ball, and that's what chewed him up a little bit. But he also had a really long season, College World Series, played the whole year, then goes straight into pro ball. And I saw a fatigued guy there. I'm used to seeing that because I go to the Arizona Fall League every year. A lot of guys are just fatigued. But I also saw the slider thing creep up. And then I got to see a ton of Dylan Crews this spring on the backfield, spring training, spring breakout, dozens of ABs. Same thing. So I think there's going to need to be a little bit of an adjustment to keep him on the ball, to really help him stay through and stay kind of in the zone longer on these sliders. But otherwise, he can handle velocity. He can drive the ball to all fields generally when it's velo. But I think he could just get better at that in general. And I think he's going to be fine. When you have that plate discipline, when you have the adjustability and just athleticism in the box that he has, and the ability to impact, he can run. At the end of the day, Dylan Crews is one of the top prospects in the game. And that's why he's going to be okay. Are you concerned about Amador at all after a slow spring training? No. And I actually got to see Amador on the backfields, and he put some really good swings on balls. Amador coming off of a hamate bone, I think it's different for everybody, but most guys I've talked to really coming back from that hamate bone. And I think that's why he kind of struggled, at the end of last year. And it could still be bothering him now. I've heard it can take like 6-7 months to really get that grip strength back and feel like yourself again. I also think that the sample is so small that a couple bad bounces or, a couple lineouts and all of a sudden it looks worse than it really was. If you look at it from a data perspective, he didn't swing and miss at a fastball in the zone in big league spring training the entire time. And that was out of 36 fastballs that he saw. He didn't strike out much, which is his MO. He walked 4 times. I think it was just a little bit of bad metabolic and a little bit of just being a young guy in spring training. He's not even 21 yet. Saw him in the backfields against some really good arms in Arizona, and he put some really, really good swings on balls. For my money, I'll take his hit tool with anybody's in the minor leagues. I really would. How far are James Wood and Dylan Crews from being on the same team? Great question, Dawson. The funny thing is if you asked me this right around the draft, I would have said, that's probably up to James Wood, even though he has such a head start, because I thought Dylan Crews would fly up a little bit quicker. Now it's up to Dylan Crews because I think James Wood could get there this year, and especially with how polished he looked in spring training, adjusting the load a little bit, starting it earlier, just subtle changes that made him look less rushed at the plate. Just really, really good things that I think that the Nationals have to be thrilled to be seeing. At the end of the day, I feel like we could probably see them. I think you're going to see them both to start 2025. I think that's the most realistic scenario. There's a world where Crews rips the cover off the ball and gets up there at the end of the year. But I think the most realistic scenario is you get Wood up at the end of the year, back half of the season. Maybe you get a September call up from Dylan Crews, but I think it makes the most sense. He just makes it on opening day next year, and you get that PPI extra draft pick incentive because Crews is going to be one of the favorites right away. And I think that probably makes the most sense. Let me see what we got here. Oh, another Matt Golding question. Thank you so much. Thank you again for this. I can't tell you how helpful this is because this is about the amount we make in like a week on some weeks on YouTube with the way that they pay you out. So thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate the super chat. Do you feel James Wood is going to suffer a bit from the whole long levers problem? I'm glad that you brought that up. I wish I caught it a second sooner. That Ellie is trying to figure out and that O'Neill seems to have figured out. So I actually think James Wood has kind of figured that out. His swing is about as efficient as it can be for a guy that has, levers that long. The thing for him is he often looked rushed. And I think guys that are that big, you got to think everything takes a little bit longer, right? Like you're loading, you're getting that stride, getting the foot down. Like it's a lot more body to control. The length is just difficult. And that's why everyone always talks about long levers and whiff. Like it's the same thing with basketball players. You got a guy with a crazy wingspan. Statistically speaking, they're going to be worse jump shooters. Of course, there's exceptions to everything, but usually that's the case. I feel like Wood has done everything that you want to see from him from the perspective of being as efficient as he can be. I mean, it is really, there's no wasted movement now. And on top of that, starting the load earlier, getting himself in a position to see the ball earlier, he's making better swing decisions. He looks more patterned and in rhythm. And that's what you need when you're, these types of guys. If you want to have some sort of rhythmic move, it's got to be something that you can time up consistently and get rolling. And he was caught in between so much last year. Changeups chewed him up in Double-A. And now I watched him take some B swings that I didn't see from him last year, right? I'm fooled on a changeup, but I still recognize it early enough to throw my hands out and shoot it the other way. I watched him do that. I think it was in the spring breakout game, one of the games I saw him this spring. I was like, that wasn't quite in his bag the same way before. So I think he's kind of figured it out to a degree at this point. What do I think Carson Williams' ceiling is? That's a good question. I'm just plugging this real quick. Sorry. I think I saw a lot of him this spring too. And I saw a lot of him last year. And I saw a lot of him in the Arizona Fall League. That's a guy I've seen plenty of. He frustrates me because he can be so good. He could be third. I think Willy Adames with better defense. Like that's what Carson Williams can be is Willy Adames with better. And I'm saying like the Willy Adames from 2 years ago. That with better defense, like the new Milwaukee Brewers Willy Adames. The problem is the swing is he's got one swing for one spot right now. There's not a lot of adjustability there. It can get a little bit stiff. And he's another guy that can get spinny and just pull himself off. There's a lot of swings where you'll see where just the front side leaves. And that's why breaking balls give him problems. But he's efficient to the ball as well. He handles velocity very well. And he's got monster power. He elevates. He's got a pretty patient approach. Ultimately, seeing his swing, I think he's a guy that's going to be a 230 hitter. I think he's going to be in that 230, 240 range, but he's going to walk a lot if it works out right. He's going to hit a lot of home runs. I think he'd be a 30 home run guy. And then I do think he can be an elite defensive shortstop. That's a really darn good player. And that's an all-star. And the years where he's not an all-star, he's still backing into 4 WAR. I think that's kind of the ceiling for him. Which prospect that didn't make the opening day roster gets called up first, and when does that happen? I think Ricky Tiedemann, because I don't think Ricky Tiedemann was sent to AAA for any reason other than he wasn't built up yet. And maybe they'll come out and say something else. That's just my guess because he got a late start to spring training due to a hammy issue. First outing, he threw like 26 pitches, if I remember correctly. Second outing, it was like 30, 40. And then the third outing was like 50, 60. He's still not quite built up yet. Why would you want to finish building up a pitcher that is often injured, a lot of injury concerns, finish building him up when he's going to be making his big league debut? So a guy that's not full go is going to be purely adrenaline, just junkied, all wired up, and he's going to cut loose and he's going to throw 100. He's going to put his body to the test. So I think it makes sense to send him to Buffalo, build him up with a couple starts, and then we'll see how Bowden Francis is doing out there. But I think one way or another, it makes a ton of sense, especially with Yariel Rodriguez in the minors, to bring up Tiedemann. So I think he makes a few starts in AAA, and assuming he looks good, I think we'll see him ultimately, get a chance pretty early in the season. Another super chat. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is so cool. As an M's fan, Colt Emerson greater than Young. Love the show. Hey, I don't blame you. I get it. I'll give you my elevator pitch on why I'm taking Cole Young over Emerson, but why I also understand that Emerson could end up being the better prospect and maybe the better player. Emerson, higher ceiling, a little bit more physical projection, a little bit more impact. But Cole Young is an above average defender at shortstop. I have no doubts that he's not only going to stick there, that he's going to play a good defensive shortstop. He also has one of the better bat to ball skills I've seen. I mean, he has put some swings on balls that are in on his hands, that like 3-4 balls off the plate inside. He somehow keeps it fair down the line. Then he's fooled and shoots it the other way. But then he gets an A swing off and puts 110. Like he's flashed 110 mile per hour EVs. You also have one of the best approaches from a guy at the lower levels last year. Walks with the best of them in terms of just, I not walks with the best of them is probably not the best way of saying it, but I would say manages his swing decisions with the best of them at the lower levels. Doesn't chase a lot, even though pitchers are going right after him. When they try to get him to chase, doesn't chase. So you have a good feel to hit. You've got a great approach. You've got frame-defying power, and you've got good defense at shortstop. To me, that's a high probability big leaguer. Cole Emerson's a candidate to move off of short, especially as he continues to fill out, which he put on like 15 pounds before this year. He also is a guy that, look, the path is great. He's very front foot oriented. There's a drift forward. And if you look at the spray charts of Colt Emerson, everything was kind of the other way. It's okay. You can succeed that way. You can be a good hitter. Like Jackson Merrill is still kind of that way too, because he's a guy that drifts a little bit. But that's something that if you're a drifter and you're struggling to hold the back hip, velocity can chew you up a little bit. And then also you can get, a little bit out front on spin, roll over some more. There's going to need to be a little bit more control of the lower half and some things that I want to see. But at the end of the day, he's flashed some really good EVs. He looks like he's a very advanced hitter for his age. He's one of the younger guys in the class, but he's probably going to move to third, puts a little bit more pressure on the bat, needs to probably make some subtle adjustments, which I think he'll be able to make to be able to tap into more power and not put the ball on the ground more. But I'm going to take the guy that's sticking it short, that has the approach already, that is produced at each stop, and I think that has at least average power in Cole Young. It's more of just high probability big leaguer that I still think has enough of a ceiling. Matt Golding, you are the GOAT. Thank you, dude. Seriously, this is awesome. Has your take on Max Clark changed? LOL. I didn't get the pick when it happened. This was the most annoying thing about the draft cycle for me, and it was because our episode, one of our Just Baseball Show episodes, we're talking about the draft, got clipped, and we clipped it, so I shouldn't say got clipped. We put it out on TikTok, and it was me saying that it would be crazy to draft Max Clark over Wyatt Langford or Dylan Cruz. I still believe that, and I think the rankings kind of reflect that. I like Max Clark; he's a top 30 prospect in baseball. But all of the comments on those videos became, Max Clark is great. You don't know what you're talking about. I think Max Clark is great. I think anybody that's on this list is great. I think anybody that's in the top 50 is particularly great. He's 26th. The floor is higher because he can than a lot of other players, because he's an elite defender, or at least projects to be. Can absolutely motor. I think that the swing, some of the adjustments he made this offseason, the videos I've seen, it looks really good. I think the plate discipline is going to be good as well. I like Max Clark a lot, but the only reason I criticized the pick is because I would have went Langford every single day of the week. And this isn't hindsight, like we said it at the time. Yes, they used the savings to go get McGonigal, and I love McGonigal. He's another top 100 guy. And, I think ultimately you got to turn the page. It's not like they drafted some, this isn't like an Anthony Bennett in the NBA type of thing. It's not Ryan Leaf over, Peyton Manning. I don't think it's going to be that kind of situation. It might be annoying if, Wyatt Langford's winning MVPs, but I think it's very high probability that Max Clark's going to be a 3-4 win player and play good center field and do a lot of really good things. So my opinion on him hasn't changed. If anything, I like him more since the draft. The things that I've seen, the limited action I've been able to go see him, I like him more than I did at the draft. But my opinion hasn't changed, obviously, because I like Wyatt Langford more than I liked him at the draft. And I obviously loved him because of now you're seeing what he's doing. I mean, he's the number 2 prospect in baseball and the only other 70, future value guy. It's Max Clark is more cut from the cloth of what Scott Harris wants now. Contact oriented, good approach. It's that polished hitter. And Langford's got a lot of good things going for him and is a good hitter. And I think that they probably undersold the Wyatt Langford hit tool, and he probably didn't fit their models as much. And that might have just been all it was. At the end of the day, I think the Tigers will make out fine. And, I think Tigers fans for the most part need to turn that page. I know you're not a Tigers fan, but, I think Tigers fans should just enjoy Max Clark and be excited about what he's going to be. Question about Jonathan Clase. What do you think his potential is? Also, when should we expect to see my boy Termarr Johnson? Clase is one of the tougher guys to peg for me. We know he can fly. We know he can play pretty good defensive outfield at 3 spots. We know he can run into some home runs too. It's got to be the steepest swing I've seen. And in terms of launch angle, I think it was one of the steepest launch angles in minor league baseball last year. What that did is he gets to the Texas League Double-A, and all of a sudden Double-A, you start seeing all those high carry heaters. And he was getting blown up at the top of the zone. It's just, I like that he's lifting. Like, I like that he's trying to elevate, and that's good. And that's going to help him tap into, above average power. But you fly. Like, you got to find a little bit of a happy balance. We need some line drives mixed in there too. His launch angle, again, was like one of the steepest in minor league baseball. So I think he's going to be a frustrating hitter always. Like, just the way, if you watch his APs, it's just the way he is. He's going to be aggressive. It's going to be like kind of like Jesus Sanchez-esque. But he can motor. He can play all 3 spots. I think he could be a really fun player. He could be a guy that steals 40 bags and hits 15, 20 home runs. I just think there's going to need to be a lot of maturation for him to get there. But he was also young for Double-A, and he is still very young overall. What's the next step in improvement for Marcelo Meyer? Another guy that I get flack for every time. Why is Meyer so low? Why is Meyer so low? He's 30. He's 30. But for me, I think the hit tool is a little bit more concerning than it's made out to be, because the swing looks so pretty. It's so smooth from the left side, but it can get a little long. His plate discipline, this was a big thing that we added to the top 100 list, write-ups here that I think is really important. You'll see 40, 45 hit, but if you got 60 plate discipline, I feel a little bit better about it. When you have high chase rates and the hit tool is fringy, it becomes a little bit more concerning. I think the power is going to be above average. It could even grow into plus as he gets more physical. I think the defense is great. And I do think that the shoulder impacted him last year. I do. But I also think that his loud moves in terms of the bat waggle and the loud barrel tip and, kind of out of sync with his lower half caused him to be rushed and caused him to kind of feel like he had to go get the baseball and be long to the ball at times. And then, of course, the injury compounded that. The swing looks better from what I've seen in this spring, a little bit quieter, a little bit more sequenced, and he's extremely talented. It's a guy that I expect to move up a little bit more, but just with some of the hit tool concerns, if the hit tool is fringy and the approach is fringy, he's going to need to tap into close to plus power, and he's going to need to be that good defender. So I do think, to answer the question though, what the next progression is for him, the next thing that we kind of need to see, I would say it's improved contact rates. I think that and really cutting down on the chase. If he's an average hitter with, even average plate discipline, I think the rest will take care of itself and he'll be a really solid player. Matt, you are crazy. You are the man. If for some reason the Reds pass on Pizzana and Condon, would Burns turn into what Reds fans thought Green would be with the high IVB and the slider? So here's the thing with Green. He never really had that life to his fastball shape-wise. And if you go back and look, and I've gone back and looked, because I always like to compare to players in the past where maybe scouting evaluations were wrong, and then what we learned. I did it recently with Jared Kelenic, because I just want to understand, why was Jared Kelenic's hit tool so highly regarded, and why is it so bad now? She went back and saw there was a lot of struggles, especially in the data, a lot of swing and miss within the zone on breaking balls, which kind of points towards a stiff swing and not a lot of adjustability. I don't know why people didn't notice that. He hit like 111 against curveballs, changeups, splitters, and I forget, basically anything that wasn't hard, he hit really poorly against, except for like sliders, he was okay, and fastballs, he was great. And so he just pillaged fastballs, hit hangers. I know that's not the question, but I learned a lot by just looking back and seeing where maybe we were wrong as an industry and how that could have happened. With Green, I think people were kind of aware of the fastball shape issues. And like, that's why when people were putting an 80 on it, like I get the velocity wise, it's an 80, but shape wise, it's not. It never performed as an 80. It just never did. Even go back to high A, double A. The whiff rates were never, swinging strike rates were never an 80 pitch. So that's why I hate basing it just on velocity. I think Burns has better shape and life and carry to his fastball. And I think it will get more whiffs. I also think that he's a little bit more polished than Hunter Green was, and I know that Green was out of high school and had injuries and things like that, but the changeup is already better than Hunter Green's was up till this year. And we'll see how the splitter is for Green. I don't think it would be that type of situation. I think he's a guy that could fly up quick. I think the changeup has continued to look better and better. That slider is gross. The fastball is great. The command is good. I don't see that there would be much of an issue. And I honestly don't think he'd be too much of a two-pitch pitcher. I think he could mix in the changeup enough. But I could see them going with Burnes there. I was actually talking about that on the bonus episodes of the call up. And by the way, if you guys like this structure, we do a bonus episode for subscribers on the call up every single week that you can subscribe to in the episode description of the call up. And we do mailbags where I can make sure I get to everybody's questions, help you with your fantasy teams, help you with card investments, and then talk about some of the things I saw in the backfields or some of the things I'm hearing. And also do a minor league heat sheet to kind of keep you up with what's going on, standouts over the week, pitchers that had really impressed, and some of the data points that stood out to me on the back end, and kind of give you guys a little bit of insight into that. So you can check out the link to that subscription-based episode that's once a week in the call-up episode descriptions on the audio side. So on Spotify or YouTube, you can find that. But I think Bazzana, as I talked about it on that bonus episode, I think Bazzana's the 1-1 guy right now just because of the field of hit now adding so much impact. Being able to post a 90th percentile exit velocity of 108 is crazy. Condon, I know, is hitting the living crap out of the ball, and the field of hit is better than I think anybody would have imagined. But there's a little bit more question defensively. Bazzana might even be able to go play center field with his speed. He can play a good second base. I have been impressed with Condon being more agile at third and even the corner outfield than I thought. The reads are not great out there. But I mean, if Condon keeps going nuclear and not striking out at all against SEC competition, then we got a conversation here. Right now, I think the balance of the floor and the ceiling of Bazzana and a guy that's going to smash all of the draft interviews, that's a guy that's, I think, going to be I don't see other Guardians pass on him 1-1. Junior Caminero moved to first base, or does he stick at third? I think that he gets a bad rap for his defense. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying he's a shortstop, but I don't think he's a bad third baseman at all. I think he's more than fine there. Maybe it's Frenchie. I think it's better than Yandy Diaz. I think he's going to ultimately play third base. I think maybe as he gets older and continues to just get bigger and slower, then we could see him at first, at 30 years old or whatever. But for now, I think he's more than capable of playing a passable third base. I know, Logan, I mentioned that. I said that's why I like the pick. But at the end of the day, I'd rather have Wyatt Langford than both of them. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter. Okay, I'm not going to do this. I saw the next one that said, sorry, I'm not going to harass you on him. I said you should enjoy Max Clark and stop worrying about Langford. I think Max Clark is great. You're the man, Logan. Oh man. It's just one of those things. I mean, okay, yeah, he plays left or right, but he could hit 40 home runs and hit 300 and win an MVP. I don't really care where he plays. You might have Paul Goldschmidt right now in left field. I'll take that. Again, I think he's going to be great. Question from, I just saw a really good one. Oh, I'll give you one more, Logan. Arm, you were the first on Ellie. Who's the next Extreme Tools guy? Well, thank you for saying that. I'm sure somebody beat me to it somewhere. And, in this prospect world, you don't want to claim to be first on anybody because then you have a war. Speaking of Junior Caminero, you had all these prospect writers and people fighting over who saw him first. The scout who signed him probably saw him first. Or the Rays who traded for him probably saw him first. Like, who cares? If you're on it and people read your stuff, like, they'll remember that you were on it. Like, here's an example. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate that. But for some reason in this industry, we have this, I was there first, like, gatekeeping prospects. Like, you should want people to know that prospects you think are good, and people to agree with you. Like, that's okay, even if they found out a little bit later. Sorry, but I just the owning, like, the taking property of prospects thing is crazy to me. But the Extreme Tools guy is an excellent question, and I'm going to just to jog my memory, like, in terms of, like, see who could stand out to me. I'm gonna kind of just scroll through this 100 and talk about some guys that I think could have some of the loudest tools. And I mean, first of all, Junior Caminero Jackson Chorio's a crazy tools guy. But I know you're talking about, like, under the radar. Let me get back to you on that one, honestly, because I want to answer some other questions and I don't want to think for too long about it and make everybody wait. But I'm going to keep that one in the back of my head while I try to think about who that next, like, tooled up freak that's outside of the top 100 could be. Because when we were talking about Ellie, yeah, he was at the lower levels. I don't think he was on lists. So, like, I don't think I wasn't even comfortable putting the tool grades that I probably should have put on because it didn't seem right. I'm like, I need to see this with my own eyes. And I did. And then that's where, we ended up, getting to where we got here with him. If Basayo moves to first base, do you prefer Basayo or Isaac? Oh, that is the toughest question I've ever gotten in my life, I think, because I love those guys both. I mean, so Basayo, by the way, has an 80 arm behind the dish. I don't know if anybody's put that out there. Like, it's an 80 arm. I've been able to get the velocities of him throwing from behind home and compare it to the entire minor leagues. It's the 100th percentile. He also is one of the worst framers I've seen in the minor leagues. Like, so bad that it might be a problem. If he can get better there, he can stick a catcher. Obviously, you have the Adley Rutschman situation, but I could see a situation where Basayo gets up, he catches once or twice a week, and plays first or DHs the other day, and Adley, predominantly catches. But to answer this question, I don't want to have confirmation bias with Isaac because I went to that spring breakout game, watched him hit a double and then 2 home runs, and it was just disgusting. The swing is so good. It's even gotten better. Now, Isaac was a guy that I know a lot of people were surprised at us having a first baseman in the top 100 last year, but I hope they're kind of seeing why, because that swing is so advanced. The ability to consistently lift is so impressive. And he also him and Basayo both can do something that's pretty absurd, which is just do damage on pitches outside of the zone. If Basayo moves to first, I think I'm still going Basayo at this point, just because of, the offense, it just reminds me of Rafael Devers. He chases too much at this point, but he also has one of the better out of zone contact rates you're going to see, which is really important if you're going to be a higher chase guy, and that's how you can get away with it. On top of that, I put together a reel. I think it's on YouTube on Twitter. If you search like @ArmLate8 and then search Basayo, you should see I put together, I think it was 8 home runs that he hit on pitches outside of the zone. And I have all of them in there. You know how insane that is? 8 home runs on pitches outside of the zone. To be able to do damage outside of the zone, that really hedges the chase concerns. But if he can continue to minimize the chase, his contact rates are only going to get better. He's going to become more of a monster. And I just think the offensive upside is just a little bit higher. That said, it's pretty close. And man, I love Isaac. He's one of my favorite players. Logan, thank you for that. I really appreciate the super chat, man. This really means a lot. Thank you. Some people also accuse me of trying to make a statement with that. Why would I put all the time into this just to make statements? Like I want to try to be as credible as possible. That's what I believe. And I'm happy to talk more about that. I realized I didn't answer Tamar Johnson and when we could see him up. Tamar is interesting because the power is immense. I think that was undersold, and then the hit tool was oversold. I think the hit tool can get there, though, and I think there's a lot of ridiculous bat speed. At the same time, there's some width. There's a lot of moving parts of that swing, a loud barrel tip, and a lot of effort. I think he's going to need to tone things down a little bit more to be able to hit enough against upper level competition. Because right now he's going to be a 3 true outcomes guy. Great approach. That helps a ton. He's going to walk, but I don't want him to be this like Max Muncy type because he's so much more talented than that. And I think the Pirates don't want that either. So I think it might be a little bit more of a slower burn with him. He may spend most of this year in high A and then just get a taste of double A once the high A season's over. Like I feel like they're going to be kind of cautious with him and let him develop and let him try to get that hit tool close to where everybody talked about it as, and so that power and hit tool can combine. If he gets that hit tool to average, he's hitting 30 bombs and he's walking at a high clip and he's a monster. You could be the best defensive the best offensive second baseman in the game if it all continues to work out in the next 4 years. So that's something that I'm interested to see, but I think they're going to be a little bit more slow with him. Yeah, I think with Elly, look, I love diving into hitting adjustments, swing adjustments, things like that, especially when I can see a tangible change and how it can help them. I think for Elly, it's really about comfort and pitch recognition. I don't know if the stance really alters too much for him. I like starting open, and I think that ultimately this is going to be more helpful for him. He's starting more open. He's starting more stacked on his backside. You don't need the big leg kick and all of these moving parts to produce major EVs if you're Elly De La Cruz, because you're Elly De La freaking Cruz, who's just an alien life form. I think the adjustments will help, and I think he needs to just get a little bit more used to him. He's going to flail, man. He's aggressive. He's long. He likes to let it eat. I think he's always going to have those flailing swings where you're just like, oh, man, that was an ugly AB. But he's also going to connect. I think these adjustments are going to help him connect a little bit more, because being a little bit open, you just focus on getting closed, staying there, and trying to stay on the baseball and kind of work through the middle. I think before he was kind of even, big leg kick, yank off, or big leg kick and just pull and try to do too much. This kind of keeps him, I think, thinking even and staying there and working that way back towards the pitcher. That's all he needs. He doesn't need a lot of movement. He doesn't need a big leg kick. He needs to simplify things and make it as simple as possible to be on time and see the ball earlier. Guys like that have the advantage. I mean, you get to do less and still produce more than everybody else. Who do you prefer in the long run? Oh, man. Enrique Bradfield Jr. or Victor Scott? Victor Scott, friend of the show, a really fun interview this offseason. Talked to him right after the Arizona Fall League. Enrique Bradfield Jr., a guy who did crack the top 100 list, right at number 99. I'm going to take Victor Scott. I think Enrique Bradfield Jr. is close to like that 80 glove. Like it's PCA-esque, but you got a plus glove from Victor Scott. You've got more impact from Victor Scott. I know people are comparing him to Esteury Ruiz. Stop it. It's just too early to do that. And I just don't like comparing players like that. Like, there's so much more nuance to it. Victor Scott made a swing adjustment, which we talked about on the show, made a swing adjustment in June. From June onward, he ran a zone contact rate of 90%. His chase rate was like at 20%. And he started to tap into more impact. Esteury Ruiz was trending to being an org guy and then had things click for him. And then a lot of his production came from the PCL. Esteury Ruiz is also pretty good, but Esteury Ruiz is also not nearly the defender that Victor Scott is in center. So I know that wasn't the question, but I just want to get that out there. Enrique Bradfield Jr. is going to be phenomenal defensively. He is a walk artist, but I don't think the bat to ball is that much better than Victor Scott. Victor Scott has more impact, and Victor Scott, I think, is it sounds crazy, but I think is going to be a better base stealer. You're splitting hairs. I like the swing better of Scott. I like the body better of Scott. I'm going to go with Scott, and that's why he's ranked higher. Oh, I love a question about Joey Loperfido. That's my boy. He'll be on the show in the coming weeks too. I'm really excited to follow up with him. We do that interview every year, and he's the man. He's a hard worker, good dude, heck of a player. Lope had a great spring training. I mean, he was awesome. And I know that Joe Espada specifically came away really impressed by him. I heard nothing but great things. I think it's a situation where they're still trying to figure out what his long-term defensive home is. I think he's developed really nicely in center field. He can play first base. He can move all over the diamond. He runs well. He's got power. He's a really well-rounded player. He's learned how to steal bags at an efficient clip, and he talked to me about that, which was cool. Lope is a gamer, and he's going to make the Astros better, I think, early in the season. But Melton gets up there over Loperfido. Mostly the age is big, too. I mean, Lope's a couple years older, I think almost 3 years older. Melton is going to play a good center field, and Melton just has more time to develop. Melton also is a plus runner, borderline plus, and I think has monster power potential, too, for a guy of his frame. There's some swing and miss concerns for sure. But I think Melton has the chance to steal 40 bags, can hit you 20 homers, and play great defense, or at least good defense in center field. He's younger. That guy's going to get the edge. But I love Lope, and he's one of my favorite guys going into this year that I think is going to get up pretty quickly. Can Homer Bush be someone like Victor Scott? Very, very fast and athletic. Worst hitter, though. I actually think Homer Bush is really good. Bat to ball wise, and he just needs to tap into more power. There's just not a lot of impact there, but put up great numbers in true Padres fashion. Got up to Double-A like immediately after being drafted out of Grand Canyon and held his own there. The approach is really good too. Never doubt the Padres' ability to scout hitting. It's amazing what Preller and co do. They find great swings and then find guys that approach and swing wise will translate to pro ball so well, and we just see it time and time and time again. whether it's Jackson Merrill, whether it's Graham Pauly, whether it's Martorella. They are always nailing these. And I think they did it with Bush too, a guy that was kind of, I think, underrated because you had Jacob Wilson over there, and then you had just people that are going to underrate any offensive production out there in that conference where the ball just flies. But I do think that he can be cut from a similar cloth. I won't sit here and pretend I've seen his defensive video much. I just haven't gotten the chance to watch much Homer Bush defense. I do think with his tools, he could be really good out there. But I haven't seen enough to be able to compare them defensively. Scott hits the ball harder, but Bush has some more time and does have room to add strength. I think he can exactly be someone like Victor Scott. And I think that the back could get there and get pretty close. How close is Sterling Thompson to the top 100? Where do you think his long-term defensive home is? He was either going to be a just missed or like just missed, because I think we cut the just missed at like 20, but there was another 10 guys that I wanted to have in the just missed, and all of them were really tough, at the final, stages there. For me, just the bat to ball wasn't proficient enough to justify the fringy power and the lack of true defensive home. So you just kind of have this tweener profile. That is what held me back a little bit. I think he's good. I think his game's going to play really well in cores where he's going to take advantage of that spacious outfield. He's a fun player. I think he's going to be an above average. I think there's a good chance he's going to be above average regular. I think there's a good chance he's going to be an average regular. I do wonder if the long-term defensive home just ends up being, second base. I hope or left field. I could see left field. If I had to guess, I'll probably say left field / second base type, like that Whit Merrifield, profile without the center field as much. Could you see Walker Martin entering the top 100 sometime this season? Yes. It's funny. I actually just talked about this on the bonus episode of the Call Up. I'm going to plug that one more time. Check out the podcasts, the latest podcast we put out. And if you look at the episode description, you can subscribe to those bonus episodes. I really appreciate the support, and that goes to, improving the production here on what we're doing. But Walker Martin, if I had been able to see more of him, I think easily could have cracked it. He's in a short list of guys that I gave a 55 future value to when I did the team top prospect list, but didn't make the top 100. Him and Rainer Arias, actually, and both Giants guys. We didn't get to see Martin at the end of the year. After high school, he just shut it down. They didn't have him play. And I watched a lot of the, summer circuit stuff, and he looked really good. He put some really good swings on balls against some of the top flight arms. He tested as one of the most explosive athletes in the class. His swing is very advanced for his age. I think he's very similar to Colt Emerson, and probably closer to Colt Emerson than a lot of people may think. I don't know if the approach is quite as good, and he is older. And that's the thing. I think he's one of the older guys in his class, if I remember correctly. But with the athleticism, with the advanced swing, and I've loved what I've seen from him so far this spring, I'd actually bet that Walker Martin is on the top 100 list by the middle of spring, or by the middle of the season, I should say. Sorry. So many great questions. Thank you so much, by the way, everybody, for coming in here and hanging out. 666. That's a bad number, but absolutely awesome. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm glad. I know we talked about Emmanuel, but I'm glad we got this question because it does give me the opportunity to talk about the write-ups, scouting write-ups, and what we're going for here in terms of why I've added that plate discipline aspect. So Emmanuel, I have a 30 present. I do think he could get to a 40 hit tool. It might end up being right around that range, but he hits the living crap out of the ball, and he has one of the more patient approaches you're going to see. I was just talking about Marcelo Meyer and I have a 45 future on the hit tool, but the swing decisions are a 45. So you combine those, and that's a little concerning because if your bat to ball is fringy and you're swinging more than the average hitter, that's not a great combination. If your bat to ball is fringy or even below average, but you draw walks with the best of them, a la, Edouard Julien, who is better bat to ball, but still he's not proficient. You can survive, especially when you got power. So there's some concern, sure, but I actually don't think the bat to ball is that bad. I think it's more Rodriguez still kind of learning what he wants to do in the box. The passiveness, he'd get himself into a lot of deep counts that he didn't need to. He'd take strikes that he should be hitting, and then end up pulling the trigger because he's behind and expanding. I think the hit tool can be good enough. And with the power and the ability to walk, I'm not overly concerned about the hit tool. Yeah, this is a good question. So, any early read on Leo DeVries, and was he even in consideration for the list yet? Salah starting in high with Lesko. Excited to see them come up together along with Snelling. Well, first of all, a quick aside. We did the interview with Lesko a week ago or 2 weeks ago. If you definitely check that episode out, because Lesko was so cool and talking about how good he feels now that he's 2 years removed from TJ. But the interesting thing about these Padres guys is they're all really good friends. And that was a fascinating aspect to it. Like Lesko was talking about how tight he is with Snelling, and how tight he's already become with like a Drew Thorpe, who unfortunately is gone. But how all those guys really like playing together, and how it's not even a competition; it's like a friendly competition. How they push themselves to be better. And I think the Padres are cultivating something really good, farm system wise, in terms of building a lot of togetherness, and I think building something where these guys all root for each other, and they have I want to win together. And I think that's important when you want them to matriculate to the big leagues. But to answer DeVries, I saw a couple ABs like everybody else in the spring breakout, and the plate discipline was clear. I mean, great approach. I love the way he was tracking balls in for such a young hitter. He clearly can recognize pitches pretty well for a guy his age. I didn't really consider him because I can't rank somebody I haven't seen. I just can't. And if I haven't seen them in person, I need to at least have seen extensive video, data, and maybe even talk to a scout or two. I know that DeVries is the popular name because he's the next big money Padres prospect, and he does seem like he's got some skills and polish that we don't see often from these young guys, and the Padres continue to nail these types of players. I just can't rank a guy I haven't seen much of. And it would have felt disingenuous. It would have felt like I'm doing it just to do it. Maybe he is one of the best 100 prospects in baseball. But at this moment, I couldn't take him over another guy in the top 100 because I wouldn't know enough. If I was building a franchise, I would have to see DeVries for myself first. So that was kind of the problem for me. Can Eddie's Leonard realistically take Javier Baez spot in a year or so? If not, is there another realistic option? I think so. I'm a little concerned about the defense with Leonard, but the bat I think is extremely underrated. I think he's really shown that the bat is just about close to ready. And look, I think the Tigers have probably had enough of, okay, yeah, great glove at shortstop, cool, but you can't hit a lick. That's been Javier Baez. I think he can. I think he could easily fill in this year, especially if the Tigers are been a little competitive and starting to show some good things. And if they just get sick of Javier Baez, wouldn't shock me. But Leonard, I'd have to watch more defensive video, to be honest. I just haven't seen enough of him. My boy Colby. Is Miguel Bleis a candidate to rise back into the list quickly with a solid start to 2024? After an injury-riddled 2023, it looks noticeably bigger, stronger, with more bat speed in spring training. Yeah, I mean, definitely. When he's tooled up, like he's crazy tooled up. He can play center field. He have a ton of power. Just another one of those instances where between the injuries and just not being able to see enough now over the last year plus, and before that, just some concerns I had. Just I wanted to see some advancement with the swing. It just was one of those things where I'm going to have to wait and see him perform for a little bit before we get him back in there. But if he gets off to a hot start in the lower levels and starts to look like that guy that we saw that has big time speed, exciting power potential, and just a smooth swing when it's all in sync, yeah, he could definitely be a guy that flies up. But right now with the injury concerns, he's been banged up a bunch, some inconsistencies with the swing. I just need to see him do it a little bit, but I do think he's a candidate to definitely jump back into the fold and be impactful. Waldrop or Smith-Shawver, who has the highest ceiling? I think Smith-Shawver. It's funny, like same thing is happening to Smith-Shawver that I think that happened with CJ Abrams and happened with Vaughn Grissom, just because they got rushed to the big leagues and then struggled a little bit. Then we put that against them. But if they were in high A and double A, like all the other 20-year-olds, and dominating, which all of those guys would have done, then we're celebrating them as the top prospect in baseball, or one of. Smith-Shawver was carving through every stop and then even held his own in AAA as a 20-year-old. Smith-Shawver has a fastball that can run up to the upper 90s. So does Waldrop, but I like Smith-Shawver's shape better. Smith-Shawver has a pair of disgusting breaking balls. Waldrop has one, but he scratched the curveball and now throws the slider. It's really good though. Since he's gotten rid of the curveball, slider's really good. Nobody in the organization has a better pitch than Waldrop's splitter, and that is huge for him. But I see a fastball that has poor shaping got crushed. I think opponents hit 327 against it in college and then like 330 against it in pro ball. A splitter that's plus unhittable pitch, and a slider that's a fringe plus pitch. With Smith-Shawver, I think you have a fastball that flashes plus, you have two breaking balls that can be plus, and a changeup all of a sudden that looked amazing this spring training. With his youth too, he's younger. He's a little younger than Waldrop. I think Smith-Shawver has the higher ceiling, but if there can be some tweaks to the fastball shape and Waldrop's command, I know Smith-Shawver had some struggles with command, but I have more confidence in the athleticism of Smith-Shawver. They're both athletes, but the athleticism of a younger Smith-Shawver, converting that into better command. And I think he was just nibbling a little bit last year because he was rushed to the big leagues. Matt Golding, you are the man. Is Southworth going to make the top 100 in the future, you think? It's funny because now I think I've seen him on a few lists, and out of the draft, I loved him. I mean, we had him high up there in the red system. I love the bat. I just think there's a lot of pressure on him to tap into power, given that he's going to be at third base. And you're hoping he can just be an average third baseman too defensively. So he's got a really slug. I think the field of hit's really good. He had a really nice second half to the season. The approach got better. He made some subtle changes that really helped him use the whole field more. I think I tweeted about that, and I think I have it in this write-up on the Reds' top prospects. Some subtle changes helped him use the whole field more body control. But I'm still waiting to see that power. It's slightly above average, maybe average right now. If he can get closer to the plus territory, he's a top 100 guy for me, or if that hit tool just becomes closer to plus. But he's a guy that could get there for sure. I've always liked the swing. I've always been interested in the bat. Guess at number one prospect this time next year. I'm going to go James Wood. I think he could graduate because that's kind of built into this, right? Like let's go to the top of this list. And let's just go through each player. I'm sorry, I do so much I write so much on this that it takes forever to scroll. Probably should cut these down a little bit, right? Holiday will be graduated. Langford will be graduated. Caminero, I hope, will be graduated. I'm sure he'll be up right after the Super 2 deadline. Troya will be graduated. Carter will be graduated. I think James Wood's the slam dunk with the upside, with what we're seeing, the improvements. But if he gets caught up early enough to graduate, I think it's Walker Jenkins. And I'm not just saying it because it's in order. Like, that's part of the reason why it's in that order. Walker Jenkins can do it all. The swing reminds me of Kyle Manzardo, but then he's an athlete who right now could potentially play center field, who has a really good approach already. You saw what he did at the lower levels in his pro cameo. He's putting up higher EVs on the backfields already. He's popped 108s, 109s. He's going to get continuously stronger. He can motor. I think he's going to do it all. The polish is going to help him put up great numbers at the lower levels as one of the younger guys at each stop. And yeah, I think it's either easily going to be him or James Wood. An outside shot guy that could maybe jump in there. I think a Basayo if the defense improves, or a Roman Anthony. If Roman Anthony starts elevating to the pull side more, that was his problem. He was elevating Oppo. We saw him put a bunch over that monster wall in Greenville. He needs to be able to lift to the pull side with his speed, with his approach, with the feel to hit, and the power that he has, raw power. I could see it. Is Yamamoto still your number 5 pitcher in Major League Baseball? Yeah. I'll stand by that one. I'm going to give him more time. I mean, the stuff is just too crazy, man. Like, I think the fastball is still incredibly unique. The splitter is incredibly unique. The curveball is unique. He's throwing with a new baseball. He's throwing in a new league. He's throwing against hitters he's never faced. And he was also doing that on the other side of the world. And there's just so many moving parts here. A lot of pressure, a lot of things going on. In terms of sheer stuff, he's my number 5 pitcher still. I'm going to stick by that. Thoughts on Brock Wilken long-term? Also a recent guest of the show. Awesome guy. One of my favorite dudes too. Just an absolute chiller. He mentioned on the show, like, working to, be a better defender at third base. And I think he will. He's got a 70 grade arm. He's improved his footwork. His approach is good. And he's a guy that elevates consistently. I think long term, it's going to be a lower batting average. I think it's going to be higher on base. I think he's going to be a 230, 240 hitter. I think he can get on base at a 350, 360 clip. And it's going to come down to how much he slugs. And I think he can freaking slug. I think he can hit 30 home runs. So if he hits enough, I think the defense is going to be good, like average at third base. You could have ultimately moved him to right where he's going to have a mega arm and be decent there. But I think it's 30 home runs, high walk rate, below average batting average, but more than palatable. Top 3 prospects to join help the Cubs this year. Michael Busch, of course. Ben Brown, of course. Brown looked awesome, by the way, in his last spring training start. Outside of those guys, I would love to see my boy Matt Mervis up there. I think he's looked awesome spring training wise. I think he deserves an opportunity, but I also understand the roster situation. I think Cade Horton's going to get up there this year. Why waste that many more bullets? He is already so polished. It's a 4-pitch mix. He found the changeup last year. That fastball has cut ride similar to Justin Steele, and it just works. It's in the mid-90s. The slider and the curveball are great. And he's filling up the zone. He finished the year with success in Double-A. Why have him throw that much more in Double and Triple-A? I think we could very easily see him up at the big leagues, and I think that's a guy that most people are probably forgetting about, not really paying attention to, and could make an impact. Owen Casey's been standing on his head, and you know how we feel about Owen Casey, one of my favorite prospects in baseball, and in the top 30 for us. He's been playing out of his mind. Every time I check in on a backfield team, playing out of his mind. I could see if they're hungry for some power, he could come up and you could give him some power. That's some of the best power in the minor leagues. See if there's any questions. Who's a prospect with every tool, but is very raw, that is not ranked highly that you like? So who's a prospect with every tool, but is very raw? Are we talking? Oh, those are 2 separate questions. Sorry, I saw the Braden Montgomery part. I was a little confused. Every tool, but is raw. I mean, I don't know if anyone has every tool, but I think the low-hanging fruit here would be a Kevin Alcantara. He's a really frustrating prospect because I do have some serious concerns about the swing just being too long, the approach not being good. But he's 6'6". He produces plus to plus EVs. When he connects, it's crazy. He flies. He can play center field. If it all comes together, he's a monster. But he's a frustrating player because I do have some serious concerns about that tool. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 30 prospect in baseball at the end of the year, but I think it would surprise me even less if he's off the top 100 list, unfortunately. Chase DeLauter make it up after the break and move the needle for the guards? I think so, Gabe. I think both of those things. DeLauter's hit and power combination is just rare. And then you have the speed too. It's rare. And then on top of that, I mean, what he could do for that lineup that, we had Stephen Kwan on the Just Baseball show. He was talking about how the Guardians have been focused on tapping into more power and adding more power. That's why they took Davis and De Los Santos in the Rule 5. And that's why they've been, taking a little bit of a different approach to, leveraging their advantage counts. Even Kwan, letting it eat a little bit more, trying to do damage when you're ahead in the count. I think DeLauter would be a huge help for them. And he's really dynamic and could give them a huge boost at the top of their lineup. He's had not a lot of at-bats, even going back to James Madison, messes up his foot. And James Madison played like 30 games in a year anyways. Showed out on the Cape, then got a late start because of another issue with the foot. Last year was the first year we really saw him. Then was really good in the AFL. Now had a really good spring training. So I think they're going to want to give him another couple hundred ABs, but I think we see him in the second half. And for a Guardians team that I think is incredibly underrated, he could be that shot in the butt that helps put them over the top. And I think he's a really, really talented player. We covered the World Baseball Classic when we were out there. We did a prospect preview on the call-up here where we talked about all the relevant prospects in the World Baseball Classic. And then, Jack, Peter, and I went out to South Florida and covered the World Baseball Classic. It was one of my favorite things I've ever done. It was one of my favorite sporting events I've ever covered. It was incredible. And if you get the chance to go to the World Baseball Classic in a couple years, you should absolutely go. It's one of the coolest things I've ever done. We will continue to cover that every single time. And we will break down those rosters and tell you everything you need to know when that time does come around. Tyler Black question. Let's go. Another criminally underrated prospect. Is Tyler Black going to be an impact player for the Brewers? Thoughts on his projection? So I don't know what people have projected him for, but I'll give you my projections. The issue for him is defensive limitations. He's either a below average third baseman. They tried him in the outfield because he's really fast, and he fractured his scapula diving. I think he ultimately could end up at first base. It's a weird profile for first base, but if he can split time between first and third, ultimately you have him up there to hit, which he does a really good job of. It's above average hit tool. Walk, he walks a ton. It's plus plate discipline and steal bags. And he stole 40 last year. He's efficient and effective. He's the perfect number one, number two hitter type, table setter. Yes, that's not usually what you look for at first base. But to me, it's like, even if he moves to first, it's like, think Ty France, but make him faster. And walk. Ty France doesn't walk. So take Ty France, make him a great base stealer, and give him better OBP skills. That's an above average everyday first baseman. Still have hope that he can play third, and I think he's gotten better there. Where do you see the top three in the draft going? I love this because I just talked about this on the bonus episode of the call-up. I'll plug it one more time. If you click on the last audio episode that we put out, link in the episode description to subscribe and support the show. But I talked about it on there. I'll talk a little bit about it here. I think right now it's Bazana. The hit tool is 70, and then he adds the power this year. Made some slight adjustments to tap into more power, went to drive line, and I don't always buy into that. But with a guy like Bazana, who just that's all he needed, and doesn't undermine what made his swing so good to tap into more power. It's more just about engaging the right muscles and sequencing the body the right way. I mean, now we're seeing a 90th percentile exit velocity of a 108. Usually you want to subtract 3 to 4 miles per hour from metal to wood. Okay, well, with his contact rates, with his approach, you have a 103, 104 mile per hour, 90th percentile exit velocity. He'd be one of the best prospects in baseball. I mean, you don't get guys with elite hit tools putting up those EVs. It's just rare. You're going to be one of the better hitters in baseball. So that, on top of the plus speed, on top of the fact that I think he's going to crush every single draft interview because he's a gamer of all gamers and just has that mentality. I think he's the favorite one right now. But Condon, if he keeps doing what he's doing in conference play against some really good pitching, I could see a team saying, hey, I'll take that 35, 40 home run upside with a shockingly good field to hit for a 6'6" guy. Still trying to figure out where he's going to play defensively. I think there's a high probability he moves to first. And I think he's athletic enough to play a passable right field or third base as he gets more reps. But I think any team that drafts him is going to be considering a relatively high risk there of moving to first. And then Burns, like what everyone was saying, Langford Cruz, and then Paul Skeens. I think this could happen too. I don't think he's quite Paul Skeens, but I do think he's pretty close. And I don't think Bazana or Condon are Wyatt Langford and Cruz, in terms of the prospect that they were at the time. So I could see it happening, but right now I think it's Bazana, Condon, Burns. And I'm always going to go with the bats, but it would not surprise me at all to see the Reds go with an arm as talented as Chase Burns, especially with the changeup looking good now too, and him starting to mix that in a little bit more. I think he could sneak in too. I think the Guardians, Bazana is the all-time slam dunk for them. He fits exactly what they want to. Given how fast he got to the majors and what we do know now, do you select Wyatt Langford first? It's funny because, yes, but it's like trades, right? When we always analyze trades, you can check in 6 months after the trade, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, this team got fleeced. Then you check in another 6 months after the trade. People are saying oh, this is kind of even. And you check in a year later. Now the other team got fleeced because there's so much that can change. Langford in 6 years, maybe struggles. Let's say I don't see it, but and then Dylan Cruz has this breakout and turns into a superstar. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that ultimately Langford is the guy that every team, if you could draft over again, would take. I don't think anybody realized how good I think the most underrated thing about the entire draft was Wyatt Langford's hit tool. I think people were thinking that it might be closer to average or fringy. It's plus. And with the power and how advanced that swing is and how consistently he barrels baseballs to all fields and the approach being out as good as it is, you can't really find a flaw in his game other than the fact that he can't play center field yet. And it wouldn't shock me if he learned it. Like, I think he ultimately doesn't, but it's a guy that converted from catcher after his freshman season. He could end up getting a lot better in the outfield. I would never count that guy out. Max Popkin, the GOAT, the absolute GOAT. Top 100 prospect for me. Where will Nick Kurtz land in this draft? That's the $1 million question, or I should say probably $5-6 million question. Guaranteed at first base is tough. He's a great defensive first baseman. He's not been performing offensively, but he could go nuclear and put himself right back into that top 5 consideration, especially with Weatherholt being injured and we haven't seen him. Ultimately, I think with the other bats at the top and some other options and other bats I like a little bit later and some prepsters that teams may be interested in too, I think Kurtz probably lands in the 6 or 7 range. Could fall maybe another spot or 2. That's probably where I see him. Have you talked about Daniel Espino since his second shoulder surgery? Is all hope lost for him? I'll never say all hope is lost for anybody. Look at Sixto Sanchez. I said all hope was lost for him. So, and then I learned the hard way there, and I'm so happy. I mean, that Sixto's back. Espino is some of the best stuff I've seen since I've been doing this. Like, it's some of the best stuff I've seen from a fastball, velocity, life perspective, the breaking ball, the change. He was going to be my number 1 pitching prospect, and then the injury happened. I don't think all hope is lost because he's so young. But shoulders are bad, and a second one before he even really started throwing again is bad. I think it's really looking rough. But I won't count a kid out that young and that talented, and I'm rooting for him as hard as anybody. Who should the Marlins draft? One of my favorites, underrated prepster, I think just fits what they need. Carter Johnson. He's from the South. Probably my favorite prep swing in the draft, maybe outside of PJ Morlando. It's another guy that the Marlins could probably consider. But Carter Johnson, really good field to hit, some power projection, chance to stick it short. Kind of reminds me of that Jackson Merrill type. And I think is exactly what the Marlins need. I'm a big fan of Carter Johnson's, and I think he's going to have a lot of helium and end up going right around that middle of the first round range. Matt Golding, you are amazing. You are actually amazing. Should the Reds just pick Burns so he doesn't have to pitch at Coors? Yeah, they got to free my dog. They got to protect him. I will say we had Chase Dollander on the show. I'm going to put that out next week. I'm excited to put that episode out because he was really, really fascinating and a really cool guy. And I asked Dollander about pitching at altitude, and he's like, I don't care. If my stuff plays, I'm going to get outs. And, I mean, I love that mentality. I'd care. But that's also why – one of the reasons why I'm here and not playing. I didn't have the mentality for it, nor the talent, but I love that because a lot of guys, a lot of pitchers, and you could tell he meant it. You'll see when we put that interview out, like he meant it. He feels like his stuff can play on the moon. It doesn't matter. And I agree. When he is himself, when he is, not flying open too early and dragging the arm, which he talked about, and I think he figured that out. He can have some of the best stuff. And he added a curveball that's better. And I think he's gonna be able to throw there. That said, yeah, I mean, Burns, I'm sure, is praying that the Reds pick him. And it wouldn't shock me if the Reds picked him. You look at the farm system, you look at the big league roster, Burns could climb quickly. Lodolo continues to be frustrating health-wise. It wouldn't shock me if the Reds went this route. But Condon might be hard to pass on too, because it could be that like CES type of power that, I mean, would just be so fun. Imagine CES with higher walk rates. Woo! That's some scary stuff. Did we get 24 Bowman Chrome yet? Can I get like a checklist somewhere? That would be great. I could try to pull up a checklist. 2024 Bowman Chrome checklist. I didn't know we had a checklist yet. I will be combing through that real quick. Oh, we might not have a checklist yet. Let me know in the comments if there's a Bowman 2024 checklist, because I would love to look into that and tell you who I'm chasing in that checklist. Any other questions we might be missing here? Oh, good one here. Someone in the back of the list or close you expect to jump. Well, I already said Arjun Namala. So let's go back to the list, scroll through it. And okay. Back range. Jefferson Rojas, I think, can fly up the ranks. Above average tools across the board, above average hit, above average power, I think potential. I think could stick at shortstop and play a good D there and can run a little bit. Dylan Head, I think, can fly. Another Padres Preller masterclass. One of my favorite swings in the draft. Motors, play a good center field. Sneaky power already, too. Like, I think he's already tapping into what could be something. I think he could grow into close to average power. You got that with plus speed, great defense in center field, a good approach, and a plus hit tool. Yeah, that'll play. That's a guy that I think could climb and fly up pretty quickly. I think Ramon Ramirez could be a monster. I think we're the only top 100 list with him on there, and I get it because he's this 18-year-old catcher in the Royals system who hasn't played above the complex. He looks good. I've seen a lot of him, and he looks good. They can get sticky catcher. I think there's above average power. I think there's above average hit. I think he could be a monster this season. Matt, you're spoiling me. Thank you. Speaking of CES, his spring was amazing. His 40, dude. So, okay. I'll just spoil alert. We did Just Baseball staff predictions, and it's one of my favorite articles we put out in a little while, where we pulled all 25 members of our staff. Everyone gave their division winners, wild card, and all that good stuff. And then we ran a tally so you could see which teams were voted, to win the division the most, which teams didn't have any playoff appearances voted in, who was picked the most to win awards. Like it's really cool. The second part of it that we're going to be putting out in the next couple of days is we also had staff bold predictions. My bold prediction was that CES hits 40 homers this year. It's bold, so I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it can happen. That was my bold prediction. So I don't think it's out of the question. His hit tool is underrated, and there's another reason why we do this plate discipline thing. I think the hit tool is above average. The plate discipline is well below average and undermines the hit tool. So that's why his hit tool gets underrated, because he's never going to walk. He swings too much. When you swing too much, you're going to tend to swing at pitches that you can't hit as well. So that's going to make you look like a worse hitter. But in terms of bat to ball, like it's not bad. It's pretty good. I think he gets slept on in that regard. I think Velasquez is the question is, who do you think is the best catcher out of the 23 drafts, Ralphie Velasquez or Blake Mitchell? Kyle Teal is actually my answer. But I think Velasquez, because he's going to end up moving off. And Mitchell, I have some questions about the bat. Super talented, but I have some questions about the bat. Kyle Teal is an athletic catcher. I think he'd be an above average offensive catcher. I have a plus hit tool there, and I think he's going to grow into average power with a good approach. So high OBP, high batting average, enough juice, good defense. Kyle Teal is the best catcher in that class for me. And he's a top 40 prospect for us at Just Baseball. I'm going to try to do a few more questions here. Make sure I get all of them. Again, thank you guys so much for hanging out. It was really fun. I'll try to do these more. Even if we didn't just put out a top 100 list, like just be able to answer your questions. Oh, this is a good one. Use the term advanced swing. What do you have to see in a swing to make it advanced? A few things. So I think one of the most common things you're going to see in a young swing is minimal control of the lower half and kind of being out of sync with the upper body and the lower body. So, a lot of young hitters, they load and then they drift forward and the bat drags. It's just normal. Like, a lot of guys really struggle to hold the back hip. And Kobe Mayo came on and talked about that, like how he made some adjustments and just learned to hold his back hip, some of the things that the Orioles had him work on to keep his weight back. I mean, naturally, you just want to go get it. And when you're facing lower end velocity and you're better than everybody else, even in college, like, you can get away with that premature forward move, and you still have enough bat speed to produce plenty. But when you're facing top flight velocity and every nanosecond matters, where your bat's going to be at the point of contact, all of that good stuff. If your body takes you out of your swing, you're going to have a lot harder time consistently making contact. And you're also going to make less impactful contact. The other side of it is, do they have moving parts that are unnecessary? And if they do they seem to already know how to control that and to rectify that? Right? A guy with a big leg kick, does he start it early and is he under control? If he is, that's advanced. If it's a young hitter that, look, it's frenetic, his timing is different pitch to pitch. That's the other thing too, right? Like, a lot of guys, you want to see them ready at release. Are you like in your launch position and ready at release? Young hitters, I'll see them, ready at release one pitch and then rush the next pitch. And that's another thing I'm looking at. I think there's a lot of things that, also guys that are really spinny. If you're somebody that gets over rotated too quickly, that's going to be something that isn't advanced. So it's a little bit of consistent timing. It's a little bit of body control. And then it's a little bit of just the path. And that's just more of like, you just watch enough swings. You can see an efficient path that enters the zone and stays through it longer. But all of those criteria can kind of contribute to what makes a swing more advanced. But that's an excellent question. If I told you this, I'd have to kill you. I'm sorry, DA. That's all I could tell you. There's a reason why I like to put in all the write-ups. I think, people should be privy to it and be able to know, the proprietary things and the key things. And that's why I bake those into the write-up. And I also think it's important to match what you're seeing with your eyes with data, right? I see a guy, let's say, with that premature forward move and drifting. I see that and I'm like, oh, he might struggle to hit balls, with authority to the pull side. And then I can go check the data, corroborate that, and that's what you see. So when you can see that and then corroborate it with, legitimate data, it's always nice. That's why I put them in the write-ups. You saw Brito and Waldron on March 4th. Well, look at you, Gregory. You're on it. You're on it. Thank you for following the Twitter. It was fun watching Brito and Waldron on March 4th against the Cubs. How might Mazur compare in the competition for the 5th spot this season? Great question. Absolutely great question, Gregory. I freaking love Mazur. And I think Mazur can be better than both of them. I'd take Mazur over Waldron within a couple. I want to see a few starts from Mazur, but at the end of the day, I think he could probably be a better option than Waldron right now. Brito has just been there a little bit longer. The stuff is a little bit louder, and I'll take that experience right now. So I think Brito's got the edge, and Mazur's right there. But I think that in the next year, or even at some point this season, Mazur can make that leap because Mazur throws fuzz like Brito, but has better command. And I that's a guy that was considered for the top 100. And our friends at Prospects Live, Reese White, does a great job over there. I know he had Mazur in the top 100. And, I don't blame him. I like Mazur a lot. I mean, I can understand that ranking. He's about to be 23. He's sitting 95, 96 with the fastball. It's not the best shape in the world, but it's 95, 96, and he spots it. He landed his slider for a strike 73% of the time last year. He's not going to get that. Changeup's good. Curveball solid. Nothing jumps off the page other than the slider, which because of the great command, I have a double plus grade on. So I guess that does jump off the page. It's probably a plus pitch that just plays up to a double plus because of the command. The other pitches are average, above average, but with the command and that slider and the confidence in that slider, I think he could be better than both of those guys and can take that number 5 spot. On Just Baseball, y'all discussed Bayo's volatility with his fastball changeup mix. Do you see a concern with that with Drew Thorpe too? So I don't think that makes him volatile. I think in a way it actually kind of makes him safe because he's going to get a lot of ground balls. And I think it's going to allow him to pitch to contact and do things like that. I think the part where it's concerning for us is guys like that struggle to get consistent with, right? Everything's breaking downward. Hitters eliminate the top third. And anything that starts at the knees, they're shutting down because everything's breaking downward. How are you going to freeze them at the knees when they know that everything's breaking down? So sinker starts at my knees, ball. Changeup starts at my knees, ball. Breaking ball starts at my knees, ball. And you can eliminate now the bottom edge of the zone, and you can eliminate the top of the zone because he's not going to want to throw it up there. Now I can shrink. The thing is, Bayo, the stuff is so nasty that he's still going to get a lot of weak contact and a lot of ground balls. See Sandy Alcantara, right? Like even in his Cy Young year, he wasn't striking out 220 guys. Sixto Sanchez, when he was doing his thing, even some of his best years in the minors, it's like 8 Ks per 9 sometimes because it's the same type of action. Thorpe is a little different because he has a four-seamer. So that buzzes at the top. 2 breaking balls that I think are really good. The slider is good, man. Like, it's a good pitch. And then his changeup for my money, I think, is the best changeup in the minor leagues. I think it's darn near an 80. And what makes it so good is it's like John Means, where it may, like from a shape perspective, not look that great, but it mirrors the fastball to a T until the last 15 feet and just fades. And I know that's like, oh, isn't that what all changeups do? No, this changeup is different because it has the same spin as the fastball. It has the same almost like spin axis, it looks like. It looks like it's going to stay up and just disappears. And I don't think there was a changeup in the minor leagues that had a higher end zone whiff rate than Drew Thorpe's. So that alone, you have the fastball tunneling up, you get the changeup tunneling down. So you have separation there vertically. Then you have a slider that just got better and better and better. He tweaked it. That's what the Yankees have been doing, man. They draft a guy, they put him in this. They don't even have him throw. They put him in their like specialized pitching program, and basically their own pitching lab, and start tweaking the arsenal and optimizing it. That's what they did with Thorpe. Tweaked that slider, became nasty, and even found him a better curveball. So I guess to wrap on that question, Bayo needs that four-seamer at the top. And he has mixed in the four-seamer, but being a pronator, he really struggles to keep that four-seamer straight and not cut it and not miss his spots. So I think I don't have it in front of me, but off the top of my head, I think the four-seam fastball strike rate was like 50%. So just no one was really worried about that. Robert, this is awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for this note. I really appreciate the plate discipline aspect. And thank you for the kind words on that. That means a lot. Do you think Jackson Jobe gets caught up this year, or am I wasting a roster spot? I do. I really do, Robert. We were talking about that a little bit earlier. From the lens of not wasting bullets, because I think, dude, this guy, again, if I'm remembering correctly, I think over the final 5-6 starts of the season, it was 55, 56 punchies, 5 walks. So the command's there. The fastball, that's going to play. The slider, that's going to play. The cutter, that's going to play. The changeup now, disgusting, that's going to play. So what more do you really need in the minor leagues? I think build up the workload a little bit, coming off of an injury and a late start to the year. And also they have some things to sort out in the big league rotation. Guys get hurt all the time. They also may, if they're not playing well, they may subtract. If they're playing well, then Jobe's probably a better option than their 5th guy. So I do think we see him at the end of the year. And I don't think you're wasting a roster spot, but you might have to be patient. Thank you, Logan. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for hanging out. I'll probably do another few minutes here. Try to answer a few more questions. I've always had trouble following a Florida team being from Florida. What are some up-and-coming farm systems you are very excited about that could be a good team to get with early? Ooh, I like this question. I mean, yeah, it's got to be frustrating. I grew up in South Florida. Being a Marlins fan was always frustrating. If I could kind of jump on the bandwagon of a team, I'm looking at my like farm system notes I have here. So you don't want it to be too obvious. I'd go Brewers, even though they're frustrating. You know, they're a little cheap. Tigers. I'd say the Tigers. I'd want to jump on the Tigers bandwagon. They're not going to be that good this year, so you still got time. They're going to be fun. They've got some of my favorite young hitters in the game at the big league level. They've got guys that are going to continue to get better. They've got some really exciting, really exciting young players. Their farm system's become really strong. I'd jump on the bandwagon with the Detroit Tigers, and like Detroit's just a great sports city, and I love it when Detroit is succeeding at anything. Can Job sit 100 for 5 to 7 innings, or was that just because it was the 9th inning? Job talked about on our episode that, you know, one of the big things that he changed was working towards home plate more, getting his energy behind him and going to home, and that helped him tap into more velocity and also just getting healthy and building up. I don't know if he's sitting 100. I think he can. I'd imagine he sits closer to 98, 99, and paces himself. 98, 99 with Ride is going to play, and he can sneak those 100s in. I think there's a chance he could sit 100 a whole start because it is a pretty low effort delivery. But I think it's more likely he's 98, 99. I know that it was that one inning, but he was also touching 102 that inning, so wouldn't be crazy. Sneaky Pirates hitting prospects besides Termarr Johnson. I'm excited to see. It's a good question because I think this system is loaded with arms. Like loaded with arms. I think almost their entire top 10 for us was all arms. So, I mean, of course, the obvious one would be Mitch Jebb, who they just drafted, but I don't want to be, you know, lame and just pick kind of an obvious guy. Probably Jack Brannigan. Man, every time I watch Jack Brannigan, I kind of wait for him to slow down. He continues to impress me. He can play a really good third base, hits the ball really hard, can motor a little bit. He's put up good numbers, 24 for 27 on stolen bases, if I remember. Like every time I see Jack Brannigan, he looks good. I think there could be an everyday player there. So that's probably my underrated Pirates guy. But it's okay. We can do anything. It doesn't have to just be the top 100, Jay. It's a good question. 3 underrated or under the radar prospects that I'm buying, not pitchers, of course. No one's ever buying pitchers. I get it. That I'm buying Bowman's of. Braylon Tavera, Baltimore Orioles, I think could be a monster. Huge, strong, impactful dude. Good field to hit for his age. Heck, was even going and getting the ball pretty well in center field. Josue DePaula, we got him 33rd on this list, but his cards are cheaper than I thought in the Dodgers system. Delauder I was picking up, and now it's too late. I wanted to pick up more, and now it's too late. They're just way too expensive. Let me think of a couple more. Can't go wrong with Kobe Mayo, but I know he's not cheap at this point anymore. Luis Lara. I know the ceiling's not that high. He's a top 100 prospect for us. Brewers prospect, switch hitter, just went deep in the big league spring training game. Walks a ton, super polished at the plate. Plays a good center field, gamer. Yeah, he's not going to be an MVP candidate, but I think he could be an above-average regular, and he might be a consensus top 100 prospect by the end of the year. And if you can get his Bowman Chrome Auto for like $25, even if his ceiling is kind of boring, it's going to go up from there. So that's another name I would definitely invest in. Try to do like 2 to 3 more questions here. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for hanging out here. It was a ton of fun. I could do this all night if my voice wasn't going and if I didn't have a flight in the morning. What timeline with Job or Skeens, Job, and Horton all looking similar right now? What do you believe the gap between those 3 is or are? Oh, sorry, I'm just reading this like a moron. Is or are they just an easy bunch to group? Appreciate you answering these. Well, thank you, Mason, for the question. I think Skeens and Jobe are nearly impossible to separate. Horton is a little bit easier to separate because I don't think the stuff is good. Like, don't get me wrong, we'll go to Horton's right up right now, and like the stuff is really, really good. But let's walk through it. Right, you got a plus heater, but I think it's like the other two heaters are 70s. Right, you got a 70 heater from Jobe and a 70 heater from Skeens. Sliders are 70. Jobe and Skeens have 70 heaters or 70 sliders. Curveball, it's been inconsistent for him, but it flashes above average. I would take Skeens's. I think Skeens' splinker that he started throwing is insane, and I'd also take the other variation of Skeens' slider. He's throwing 3 variations of his slider. He has the sweeper that he threw in college, and then so far in spring training, it's breaking my brain. I've been tracking all of the pitches data-wise. He's been throwing 2 sliders that are harder and different than the slider he threw in college that was disgusting. So I would take the variations of his slider over Horton's curveball. And then that changeup that Skeens is starting to throw now, that like it's like a splinker, it's gross. Jobe's changeup was gross. I think both of those could flash plus. Horton's is inconsistent, didn't fill the zone up with it, but could be above average. Jobe's command is better. Skeens' command, I think, is probably a little bit better. So, I think you just have a separation of those two guys to Horton. Like they're tier 1 by themselves, and then Horton is the crown jewel of tier 2, and kind of in his own, almost in his own tier 2. Victor Scott obviously improved his game since getting drafted. And can he become a 55-plus player? He's improved a lot of ways. It was really cool to talk to him about that. He just talked about like the work that he puts in, some of the things that he's trying to do at the plate, his approach. He's added some strength. Recovery has been huge for him. His defense has just gotten better and better and better. But I think it's a little bit of the swing adjustments he's made. He made some adjustments to simplify things as much as possible and kind of just he feels like he's got a really good path. He's really efficient. And he felt like his body was taking him out of the swing. This is what he told me. And now he simplified it. He stacked more on the backside. It's pretty much a toe tap, almost no hand movement, and go. He kind of got stuck with where his hands used to be in the past. And so he kind of adjusted the setup there. And he pretty much just got himself in a spot where he could just consistently get slotted early and have that same swing, repeat. And the approach got better. He got a little bit more physical, and his body started recovering better. And all of a sudden, you've got a top 100 guy in Victor Scott. So I just think it's a little bit of maturity, a little bit of some adjustments, and a little bit of physical maturity as well. Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate that. It's been really awesome meeting so many cool and knowledgeable people in this prospect community. And I can't thank everybody enough for the support, whether it's subscribing to the YouTube, the subscribing to the podcast, or of course the bonus episode paid subscribers. I mean, that's just surreal that I get to do an extra episode a week for people that, want more content. So it's really cool. I saw the tweet about your father in the ballparks you'd like to attend. Sorry for your loss. Well, thank you so much, man. It was just 7 years, 5 days ago. But also my dad is the reason why I'm sitting here right now talking to you guys at 10 o'clock. I wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for him, and this keeps me connected to him. But I'm going to be out there in Cleveland. I'm going to be out there for the National Card Show, and then I'll also be out there hopefully another time to catch a game one way or another. I would love to say hello. If you're out there and you see that I'm out there, if I don't remember, shoot me a DM. I would love to say what's up, catch you at the game, catch you at the National, whatever it may be. I always love running into people at ballparks and just talking prospects, talking baseball. And, I don't think I'll be covering that game. So we can just have a beer and talk ball and watch the Guardians shock the world. Timmy, thank you so much. I really appreciate you hanging out. Thanks for the awesome question. And Just Baseball Team, I can promise you, is giving you love back. I think this will probably do it for me. If this is something you guys want me to do more often, like we can start scheduling that in. I'll do some more YouTube lives, break down lists, talk about prospects, like check in every few weeks or every month with what's going on in the minors and do some more Q&As. It was a ton of fun hanging out with you all. You guys asked some awesome questions. And that's the coolest part about this is I feel like I've got such a knowledgeable audience of people that just really, really push me to learn more and dig more and try to give you as much information as I can. So I really do appreciate all the help and all the support. Sorry, I was reading another question. You can subscribe on your phone as well. If you go to the audio episodes on the podcast network or on the podcast, you can see like it'll say like support creator, like bonus episodes or whatever it may be. You click that, and I think it'll send you through Red Circle to register. I'm fairly positive you could do that via your phone too. And those episodes will be out every week, and I'll always make sure to answer all of those questions. I'd love to do this more with you guys. Thank you so much. And Kuzi, if you have any issues, DM me, and I'm happy to walk you through it. I really appreciate the support, man. It's been awesome. Everybody's saying we should do it more. Okay, feedback received. We will do it, and maybe we'll do some giveaways in the future and some stuff like that. Maybe I can try to get some players to come on and hang out. I really do appreciate. Oh, geez, you're gonna inflate my ego before I go to bed. Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much. This is a dream come true for me, and I appreciate you guys making this possible and hanging out. I will definitely do this more often. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. We will be putting out top draft prospects soon. Keep an eye out for that. I'm going to be putting out my top draft prospects, a big board there, and then finishing out the rest of the top prospect lists out there, for each of the rest of the 15 teams. Again, thank you so much, everybody. It was a fun 2 hours with you, and we will do this again soon, I promise. In the meantime, tune into the Call Up and the Just Baseball Show.